Section 1. Shadows and Silence. Written by Stieg Larsson. The alley was a black maw, teeth of crumbling brick lining its jagged edges. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating any light that dared to enter. Each step taken within this forsaken place echoed with a hollow, haunting resonance, as if the very ground beneath was whispering tales of forgotten sorrows and lost souls. A single sputtering bulb cast a sickly yellow glow, its light devoured by the encroaching darkness. The bulb flickered intermittently, casting eerie shadows that danced and twisted on the walls, creating phantoms that seemed almost alive. The light was a feeble guardian against the overwhelming blackness, struggling to maintain its existence in a world that had long since abandoned hope. The air, thick with the stench of decay and damp earth, hung heavy and still. The smell was a pungent reminder of the alley's neglect, a testament to the passage of time and the absence of care. Trash and debris littered the ground, remnants of a world that had moved on, leaving this place to rot in its own filth. The dampness clung to everything, seeping into the very bones of the alley, making it feel as though the walls themselves were weeping. A chill wind snaked through the narrow passage, whispering secrets to the shadows. The wind carried with it the faintest hints of distant voices, as if the alley was a conduit for the whispers of the past. The shadows seemed to listen, shifting and swaying in response, as if they were alive and aware of the secrets being shared. The wind's touch was icy, sending shivers down the spine of anyone brave enough to venture into this forsaken place. The silence was absolute, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from a leaking pipe. Each drop echoed through the alley, a rhythmic reminder of the passage of time in a place where time seemed to stand still. The sound was both soothing and unsettling, a constant presence in the otherwise oppressive quiet. It was as if the alley itself was crying, each drop a tear shed for the lost and forgotten. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, pregnant with unseen dangers that lurked just beyond the reach of the flickering light. The silence was a living entity, wrapping itself around anyone who dared to enter, suffocating them with its weight. It was a silence that spoke of hidden threats, of eyes watching from the shadows, of dangers that could strike at any moment. It was a silence that demanded respect, a silence that warned of the consequences of trespassing into its domain. This was not a place for the timid. This was a place where darkness held dominion. The alley was a realm of shadows, a kingdom ruled by the absence of light. It was a place where fear thrived, where the unknown reigned supreme. Those who entered did so at their own peril, for the alley showed no mercy. It was a place that tested the limits of courage, a place that revealed the true nature of those who dared to walk its path. In the end, the alley was a mirror, reflecting the darkness within us all.
I moved through the darkness with a confidence born of years spent navigating the city's underbelly. My footsteps were silent but sure, my gaze sweeping the alley ahead, missing nothing.
Her long black hair, pulled back from her face in a tight braid, swayed slightly with each step. Her eyes, dark and alert, missed nothing. She was a shadow herself, blending seamlessly into the darkness. But unlike the shadows that clung to the alley walls, Lena carried a quiet strength, an unwavering resolve that radiated from her like a beacon.
A sound, barely audible, reached my ears. A muffled whisper, carried on the wind. I paused, my senses on high alert. My hand instinctively moved to the small but heavy bag slung across my shoulder. It was a familiar weight, a comforting presence.
The whisper came again, closer this time, followed by the scuffle of footsteps on pavement. 3 figures emerged from the darkness at the far end of the alley, their forms silhouetted against the faint glow of the streetlight beyond. They moved with a predatory grace, their bodies blocking the light, casting long, menacing shadows that stretched towards Lena. The men fanned out, forming a loose semicircle around her, trapping her within the inky blackness of the alley. The air was thick with tension, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your heart race. She could feel their eyes on her, like predators sizing up their prey, each one waiting for the right moment to pounce. Their faces, illuminated briefly by the flickering light, were hard, etched with years of street life and hardened by countless encounters like this. The flickering light cast eerie shadows, making their expressions even more menacing, as if the darkness itself was conspiring with them, their eyes glinting with a mixture of malice and something else, contempt. It was as if they had already decided her fate, and it wasn't a pleasant one. The glint in their eyes was a promise of violence, a silent vow that they would enjoy every moment of her suffering. They saw a young woman alone, an easy target. Vulnerable and out of place, she seemed like the perfect victim for their cruel intentions. But appearances can be deceiving, and they were about to learn that the hard way. They did not see the predator that lurked beneath her calm exterior. Her eyes, though seemingly filled with fear, held a steely resolve. She was not as helpless as she appeared, and the men were about to find out just how wrong they were.
Well, 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 look what we have here, boys. His voice dripped with sarcasm and overconfidence, a sneer curling his lips as he spoke. He took a step forward, his posture exuding arrogance and a false sense of security, a little birdie lost in the dark. His words were meant to belittle her, to make her feel small and powerless. But she was far from lost, and she was certainly not powerless.
He took a step closer, his eyes raking over her, lingering on her bag. He thought he saw fear in her eyes, but he was mistaken. What he saw was a calculated calm, a readiness to act.
Why don't you be a good girl and hand over your valuables? His voice was a low growl, meant to intimidate. He was used to getting what he wanted through fear and force. We might just let you go. The other men chuckled darkly, their laughter echoing off the alley walls. They were confident, too confident, and that would be their downfall.
Lena met his gaze, her expression unreadable.
You're mistaken, I'm not lost.
The words were barely out of her mouth when she moved. It was a blur of motion, so fast it was almost imperceptible. One moment she was standing still, the next she was a whirlwind of limbs and fury. A fist connected with a jaw, a sharp crack echoing in the stillness. A foot shot out, catching another man in the chest, lifting him off his feet. The third man lunged, a switchblade glinting in his hand, but Lena was too quick. She twisted, ducked, her hand shooting out to grab his wrist, deflecting the blade. The fight was over almost as quickly as it began. The three men lay scattered on the ground, groaning in pain. The alley, once filled with the sounds of struggle, now echoed with their labored breaths and the distant hum of the city. The streetlights cast long shadows, highlighting the aftermath of the brutal encounter. Lena stood over them, her chest heaving slightly, her gaze cold and unforgiving. Her eyes scanned the scene, taking in the fallen figures with a mixture of disdain and satisfaction. She had fought hard, and it showed in the way she held herself, a warrior who had just claimed victory. She had not escaped unscathed. A thin trickle of blood ran down her cheek from a cut above her eye, but she showed no sign of pain. The wound was a testament to the ferocity of the fight, yet Lena remained stoic, her expression unyielding. The blood glistened under the dim light, a stark contrast to her pale skin. She picked up her bag, her movements deliberate, and stepped over the groaning form of one of the men. Each step was measured, her resolve unwavering. The bag, heavy with the weight of her belongings, seemed almost insignificant compared to the burden of the night's events. He reached out a hand to grab her ankle, but she was already gone, melting back into the darkness. The shadows embraced her, concealing her from view as if she had never been there. The man's hand grasped at empty air, his desperation palpable, leaving the men to nurse their wounds and their humiliation. The alley returned to its usual silence, the echoes of the fight fading into the night. The men, now left to their own devices, began to stir, their groans a reminder of their defeat. The city continued its relentless pace, indifferent to the violence that had just unfolded in its shadows. The silence returned, heavier now, thick with the metallic tang of blood and the stench of fear. Lena walked on, her footsteps echoing in the stillness, each step a testament to her strength, her resilience. She did not look back. She never did.
They should know better. This is my city, and I am not prey.